Hello, everyone. This is Belinda Carr, and you're listening to my podcast on building science, products, and technology. As we know, the construction industry is ripe for disruption and automation. It has been reliant on manual labor and outdated tech for far too long, which has led to lagging productivity. Every week, I chat with a company that is exploring ways to tackle these issues. Today, I'm speaking with John Fay, CEO and founder of Lada Cube in Grand Junction, Colorado. Thanks for joining us, John.
Yeah, Belinda, thank you so much for having me.
So I recently came across your company on LinkedIn, and my interest was piqued when I watched a video of your product being assembled on YouTube. So let's go back to the basics for people who have never heard of Lada Cube before. What is Lada Cube?
Yeah, so Lada Cube is what I would call a building technology company. And really the vision of Lada Cube is seeing how we can productize construction. So we feel like within productization, there are so many benefits to the reusability and the sustainability model of building out spaces, and then over time, either reconfiguring those spaces or relocating or selling that product to another individual or company to be reused.
Yeah, so how did you come up with this idea? Because going through architecture school, the idea of Legos. Everyone talks about Legos. Imagine if all construction could just be Legos. So pieces that can come together. And then if you wanted to grow or expand in the future, just remove certain parts and put in a larger part. That everyone has this obsession with modularity and Legos when it comes to construction. So how were you able to turn that idea into an actual product?
Yeah, it's kind of a non-traditional story. So as you said, what kid doesn't love Legos? My kids have way too many of them, and but sometimes I love to play with them too, even still. But really, my background is not in construction. It's not engineering or architecture. So I actually have an undergrad in history and a master's in counseling psychology. And so at the time, I had worked a lot in mental health, mostly with youth. And in 2009 and 10, I was a school counselor, ironically. And my wife at the time had a music school, and she was thinking about how do we maximize the model for awareness of what she was offering. And so part of that was we thought, well, we'll look at some commercial retail space. And so I went out with a real estate broker and looked at 5 properties, and I just came away so frustrated. And I'm a man of faith, and I was just praying. I said, God, why is this bothering me so much? And the things that were really bothering me were the idea of tying, hundreds of thousands of dollars into a space I didn't own. And then feeling like when the lease came due for renewal, I didn't feel like I had any leverage because all my assets were tied to this building. And then the worst part was feeling like, when I leave, it's just going to be all demolished and thrown away. And I was just so bothered by the model, and I'd never thought of it before. And so I was just in my prayer time, just saying, God, why does this bother me so much? And I heard God's voice in my head, which I heard the Lord say, well, I want you to build a wall that looks like a real wall, but can come apart. And I was like, God, you got the wrong guy. I am not the guy. And so that was kind of the beginning of the process. And it really took me time to even believe I could do it, because I felt really insecure and inefficient to be the person to really come up with anything. But my wife has been such a champion for me and just said, you know what, if God's telling you to do this, you need to do it. And so clearly out of obedience, I started making stuff in my garage, but it took 2 years because I felt so paralyzed.
So that's a beautiful story. So how did you, once that idea started forming in your head, what were the first steps you took? Because you identify the problem of everything being permanent, and like any construction that you do inside a particular building, it's permanent. And it's impossible to relocate it. Or if there are modular systems out there, they look really cheap. They look temporary. So how did you identify the materials to use to come up with a more polished system that could be taken apart and reused somewhere else?
Yeah, so I think the process for me initially was really researching what existed on the market. And so a lot of those processes initially led me to SIPs, structurally insulated panels. So in that process, I was able to partner with a few SIP companies, test out my theory through small modeling And so a lot of that modeling was where the product would be fabricated and then sent to my house, my residential house. And then I would spend, time over months really adding in pieces of technology that I thought needed to be a part of the system. So in that process, before that, I, took it upon myself to learn SketchUp. And I really pulled together, kind of a charade board and really pulled all the pieces of design that I felt like needed to be a part of what I was shown. And so over the course of a couple months, really ended up making the first prototype in my driveway. It was such a rewarding process because I'd really never built anything significant in my life. And so it was
seeing
this
something
really,
come, like something that you've imagined and then something that you built with your own two hands, it is a very rewarding feeling.
yeah, it is. I feel like it really takes us back to, some of the things we're probably built for that we've lost as an art. And so, yeah, the process was just, it was pretty archaic in some ways, but it really was the beginning of ideation and really processing through like, how could this possibly be done? And so those are some of the early stages of the process for me.
So it sounded like you first started off using plywood or OSP or something with your SIPS panel, your version of SIPS panels, but then you eventually transitioned to metal systems. And there's an example right behind you of your current day version. That's probably like version number 100 of the Lada Cube system.
Yeah, this represents probably 7 years of investment, both in time and money and energy. But really, I knew in the process, I knew some of the early materials that we were using were not the final solution, but I felt a little hamstrung at the time of like, how do I get to this vision in my mind of what I know the walls can be? And really the vision had to be this process of really partnering with some unique engineers that I feel like God put in my life. And in that process, really taking all of these ideas in my head and really working through those with these engineers to really develop what you see now, which is our version 4, which is really the platform that we build off of moving forward.
So what does the wall do? Like, how does it come together? What can be attached to the wall? How does it work?
Yeah, so a couple things. The walls come in pre-built cassettes. So we have basically 8 standard sizes. And we've really maximized those sizes from parametric design to be able to understand that with those 8 configurations, we can build virtually any floor plan. So, and I say that within, usually typically an inch or 2 variation at some locations, whereas most locations are pretty spot on. But with those 8 cassette sizes, we're able to come in and with the pre-built blank cassette, we call it, we can take a floor plan or architectural drawings, and we can basically pull those into our system. So we're starting to pull generative design into that as well to speed up those drawings. But within a cassette, there's a lot of variability to what you can do to it. So you can add electrical, you can subtract it, you can add plug and play electrical that we have, or you can use standard electrical. You can add blocking or take blocking out or relocate it. We have a wet wall system. We have a power wall that can hold circuit breakers of various sizes. So we're really starting to integrate and pull in all of the unique variations that are required on a construction site.
So when you say use blocking, are you referring to, you're not talking about traditional 2x4s. This is purely a metal wall system, right?
So everything we do is a digital system. So when you look at our cassettes and structures, everything we build falls within about a 1/1500th of an inch tolerance, which in traditional construction is unheard of, right?
Yes.
And so even with the blocking, it's all digital, but it's productized inventory of material that's metal blocking that has variability in terms of where it can be placed within a cassette. And then it can be added in or subtracted. And each of those blocks is rated at 300 pounds per block. And so we work with companies like Herman Miller, and they come in and put their cabinets and their sinks and all their products into our walls. And the feedback is we've never put our product in a straight or truer wall.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's kind of a really beautiful model of just
something that's very hard to achieve with warping wood and drywall. Yes. That's something we're dealing with right now because we're renovating our house, our 1970s home. and
Cool. Yep.
none of the walls are straight. And
Yep.
once you have to start adding layers and layers of mud to get something that's manageable. It's just such an outdated method of construction.
It ends up looking beautiful typically, but there's a lot of process in that, right? And a lot of waste.
Yes.
And so, when you look at just the dilemma of the lack of skilled labor pool that's really diminishing, we're able to go onto a project site and we can bring like 50% of our crew who have never touched the product ever. And within 30 minutes, they're already assembling, walls, and they look like real walls, and it looks like a finished product.
So you mentioned Herman Miller. I think this would be a good time to start talking about who else uses Lada Cube.
Yeah.
It's not just for temporary walls. It could be display structures. It could be interior walls in homes as well.
Yeah. So our one of our dreams is housing. We've done some small ADU prototypes in the past with previous versions. Our version 4 that we have now, it has that potential based on its structural capabilities. But a lot of our clients right now are commercial retail. We're actually starting to do some residential interior build outs, like pole barn structure. Where just customers are looking for efficiencies of speed and scalability. But then over time, they see the value in taking those products and understanding how they can basically use those as future assets. So one of our biggest clients right now is Wal-Mart, which kind of doesn't get too much bigger than that. But we've been tasked with building out their vision centers, their optometry centers.
All those little stores that you see right when you enter Walmart.
Yeah.
That seems like the ideal use for Lada Cube, because they're constantly having to change those stores, whole different inventory, or completely change who's inhabiting those stores too. They have different companies in those.
Yeah,
every month.
They call those tenant spaces, which is kind of unique, right? So you kind of have a pre-built hollow shell, which allows you to be super creative in terms of using a product like Lada Cube. So our walls are able to go into spaces and use existing walls as well, so we can build off of all sorts of existing conditions and structures. So that really plays well with a client like Walmart.
So what's the process when you do identify a client and you start working with them? Do they tell you what they want and then you build out these walls digitally and then fabricate the walls? Or do you have inventory that can be used ready to go?
Yeah, so it's basically the process looks similar to this. So we have a bunch of blank cassettes in our 8 sizes. When a project comes in, we basically configure that project to the client's floor plan. From there, we do four key drawings. One's called a centerline drawing. One is called a cassette drawing, which actually is sequenced to the project, and that's really critical. And then the sill plate drawing as well, which allows us to lay down the groundwork for the basically the base plates and build off of that. And then the last one is the electrical diagram. And so what we do is our engineers basically pull all of those documents into our drawings, and then basically put those into shop orders. And those shop orders go out to our manufacturing facility here in Grand Junction and basically get pulled and configured to that project. And so down to the labeling of the cassettes, the number of when they'll be installed within the project, so that you have the efficiency of going to the next pallet, grabbing the very next cassette you need, and basically installing it as you go.
So it's basically a zero waste product. I mean, there's nothing that has to be done when you transport it to the job site. They just have to assemble it. And even in your factory, you're only making what's needed.
Yeah, it's a really clean process. That's what we hear a lot on a lot of these job sites is we've never had a cleaner site. So, general contractors, clients will come and say, we can't believe how clean this process is. And so really the only customization is basically some less fitting skins that basically will go against existing built walls here and there. So you can reuse 100% of the cassettes, and you can reuse roughly 75 to 80% of the skins. And so we've actually transitioned product from one project and actually taken it down and put it into other projects very consistently.
So this would be a good time to start talking about the two main product lines that you have. You have the walls, the Lada walls, which is an example that you have right behind you. And you also mentioned the skins, Lada skins. What is
Yeah.
Lada skins?
Yeah, so we have, obviously the skins are the finishes, and the uniqueness of our skins is we really try to come up with solutions and products that most closely mimic traditional drywall. And part of that is, in my opinion, like drywall has this inherent feel that our emotion that you get when you go into spaces and places. It really has a warm feel to it. And then it has the benefits, long term of the repairability, the ability to change up the look through painting or adding on other materials. And so one of our skins that we use is it's a dovetail. Sorry, the dovetail is one of them. So the dovetail is a hanger system that has hardware on both sides. It has hardware on the skin side and on the cassette side. And basically, you can take a panel and you can just hang it on the cassettes. The other more efficient system that we have is a French cleat system. And that's basically a CNC'd, cut groove in the back of our panels. And one of the traditional materials that we use is consistently is a 1/2 inch fire rated MDF. And then we have our own proprietary material called PBTL. And what we do is we take basically a paper veneer and adhere it to that material. And that really gives us the ability on these projects to paint the walls, to have them repainted. When we have damage, we can repair it very similarly to traditional drywall. But with a lot of the flexibility of, speed and reusability.
Very cool. So the paper-backed skin that you just mentioned, is that on MDF or is that a different backing?
Yeah, so the PBTL is on MDF. And part of that too is MDF is easily to source for us, but it also has the fire rated FRTW designation for a lot of these type 1 and 2 building requirements for IBC. So the nice thing with the PBTL is it allows you to basically, like I said, paint the material, repair it, but we can also do other materials. So we've done projects. We have a project getting installed today, actually, at the old Hewlett-Packard campus in Loveland, Colorado. It's going to be a makerspace, and it's going to be a combination of the PBTL, but also with a polycarbonate wall. So the entire wall will be semi-transparent. And the nice thing is that Hewlett-Packard campus, former Hewlett-Packard campus, has a lot of natural light that permeates the space. And so we really wanted to take advantage of that light throughout that space. And so,
solid wall would have disrupted the flow of light. Okay.
Yeah, so it's going to be a beautiful project. I'm excited to see some photos at night with the lights on in the space. But it shows the versatility of Lada Cube product, primarily from the standpoint of, there's so many different options for materials that you can use on our walls.
On your website, I've seen slatted wooden walls. I've seen this beautiful parametric walls as well. So there's a lot of customizability available with these Lada skins.
Yeah, and that was really important for me when I started the company and when I started inventing the product. Is really, I felt like we didn't want to be so inclusive as a product that it really left out the creatives, like the designers, right, the architects, and it didn't leave out, the tradespeople as well, that they couldn't work on our walls. And so we've really designed, especially this version 4, in a way that you can source any material you want as a finish, as long as it falls within some dimensional requirements on thickness. The sky is almost the limit on the materials that you can finish our walls with. You could tile it if you wanted to. It has all these flexibilities. So and even with the trades, like I talked about, we really believe that you can't take a whole industry and say, yeah, sorry, this is so inclusive, you can't use our product or work on it. So you could have an electrician come and do all the electrical, and it can integrate with our walls. We have a wet wall for plumbing, so plumbers can basically plumb everything within that cassette. So yeah, we really try to have a product that everyone can engage with.
That's amazing. So how has the demand been since you started this company in 2013? I bet it's a lot of people in the industry are pretty excited about this.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag, I think, in some ways. We've kind of maintained under the radar for quite a while. And I think it was obviously in my heart, I was like, man, I just want this to explode and take off. But I feel like God was really patient with us and said, yeah, that's probably not a good scale plan for you. So, and really the process for me over the last 10 years has been really a process of proving the product out for myself. And so early on, we had the pleasure of doing some projects for WeWork, some prototype projects for their We Live concept at the time in 2016.
Oh, that makes sense too. That seems like a good application for Lada Cube, Lada Walls.
Yeah, we came in and built these really cool cabin pods, and they had, one side was all glass with a curved glass going around. And so it was kind of looking at the reuse of space and understanding, what spaces are permitted for, but how maybe you could take a studio apartment and turn it into a 4-bedroom apartment. So there were some unique models, and then we had the pleasure of doing a few projects for Tesla at the Tesla Gigafactory early on. So built out a conference room and a phone booth. And the phone booth is kind of like just the smallest application you can get, right, on a product, I think, of ours, to be able to showcase the technology. So we've had some really unique opportunities early on. But now we're kind of at this stage where we are seeing a lot of interest. It's a lot of big companies that I think are able to absorb, the excitement and kind of the lift it takes to really go with something so uniquely different. Yeah. But I do believe that will just continue to grow and increase as well.
And like you mentioned at the start of our conversation, issues like labor shortages are definitely driving people to look for products like yours, something that can just be easily slotted on site with minimal skilled labor involved. And you can see the results pretty fast. You don't need to opt for traditional methods of construction to see a really polished result.
Yeah. And we're seeing, adaptive reuse, especially after COVID, has been really huge. And companies, I think, especially during COVID, I feel like there was a lot, and understandably, there was a lot of just companies being paralyzed of like, what will this look like moving forward? How do we do this? And so a product like Lada Cube just seems like the timing is so perfect of saying, well, you don't have to fully have something, if you do a project, it doesn't have to be set in stone for the next 10, 15, 20 years. You have the flexibility now to take those assets and reconfigure them, reuse them, relocate them.
Do you buy back the cassettes from customers after they don't need it anymore? They decide to move?
That's one of our visions, is having a buyback program. And I actually believe that there'll be a big market for resale. So almost like the Craigslist of Lada Cube, where individuals or companies can say, oh, we need this size cassette and this, and they can go on that site. We'll probably have some of that too on our website eventually, and you can basically say, because it is a product, you can say, I need this, I need 5 of these, have them shipped. And that's the other thing, is the speed. The speed is kind of unheard of. So, our vision as a company is that any project we can turn around in 2 weeks.
Wow.
So that's really, we're probably around 4 weeks right now. Which is still pretty good, but we're working towards the 2 weeks, and a lot of software and generative design plays into that quite a bit, which we can talk about at some point. But yeah, speed. We'll go do a project for Walmart that would normally take about 30 days, and we'll do that project in 4 days.
So is the product entirely made in the States?
It's a combination. So we originally started out with manufacturing in the States, in Colorado, complete manufacturing, so fabrication of our parts and pieces. We, in that process, have since transitioned to, we have fabrication now in Mexico and in South Africa.
Okay. So you talked about how software plays a huge role in y'all bringing down the lead times from 4 weeks down to 2 weeks and being one of the fastest solutions out there on the market. So what are you parametrize? What's the parametric side of your business?
Yeah. So kind of some things that we're doing is early on, we started to see that working with architectural firms, the process is so tedious, right? And it's not their fault, right? When I say this, I'm not like pointing the finger.
Don't worry, I'm a self-hating architect, so.
Okay. Um, but really, we would see a couple of things. We would see design take quite a long time, and in that design, we would see repeated mistakes because they're doing hundreds of layouts, especially in the Walmart situation. Like we're just one category of many. And so we would go to sites and we assumed that some of the product, like light switches, outlets, those things were in correct locations. And we'd go on site after we built something and they'd say, oh, wait, the head architect would say, well, this isn't the right location. And we'd say, well, okay, how do we fix that? So what we did was we started coming up, and you've heard these concepts before, but we started creating kit of parts. And so with that kit of parts, from our standpoint, what that looks like is we take standardization of components. And so like Walmart's a perfect example because you'll have the same like focal wall as one of the applications. You'll have the same section of wall that would be consistent from store to store across the chain. And so what we've done is we've kitted that out so that we know exactly where all the outlets go, where all the hangers go, where all the anchors go. And we're able to pull that into generative design through the software, through drawings, to be able to pump those into the drawings right away. And so something that might take, an hour or two to design some of those components, now you can get it done in about 2 minutes or less.
And then you'll get a quantity takeoff directly from that. And it just speeds up everything, the whole process.
Yeah, and it's beautiful, right? Because instead of the architects drawing the same wall over and over and over again, you're literally pulling components into the drawing. And then the nice thing about that data is it not only computes to that side, but it spits all the information out for us from a pricing standpoint for the customer, from a manufacturing, from an inventory. So it's a really beautiful system.
It's so much clarity and then so much transparency because how much the quantity you need and how much of each material you need. There's just less back and forth going on between you and the architect or the client.
Yeah, if I can tell you, the first project we did with Walmart, and this was on our end too, because we were learning a lot. It took about 150 hours to design. And then we slowly started chipping away, and now we're down to roughly 2 hours, and we're going to get that probably down around 15 minutes.
That's amazing that Walmart has been such a good partner with y'all to help y'all grow, figure out all the kinks and streamline your process. I guess they identified the value of your product really early, and sounds like they've been really good for your business.
Yeah, they've been remarkable. So we work with a division called Wal-Mart Health and Wellness, and they're a newer division within the last couple of years. And they are doing some of the most groundbreaking innovation I've ever seen. They just do a beautiful job of really pressing into trying to change the way things are done, unlike anybody that I've ever worked with. Even to the point when you look at their model for healthcare, they're really pressing into healthcare models where you don't have to have insurance, and you can walk in and pay $50 for a doctor's visit with no insurance. And so they're really like doing beautiful things that I think will really help people tremendously and really take some of the overhead and the burdensome out of the process. So
Wow.
if you ever get a chance, look into it. They have a number of clinics that are up and running. And I've just been really overwhelmingly impressed with the things that they're pressing into.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. And this might be something you can't share with us, but I've heard that Walmart's expanding their headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas. Are you involved in any of those projects?
Yeah, so obviously you can look it up and see what they're doing, building a brand new, beautiful campus, a lot of CLT, which is really exciting. I think they're going to probably end up with, my guess, is probably one of the biggest CLT factories.
Wow, really?
Yeah, based off of, the stuff they need to build and what they're pressing into. But yeah, that's kind of all I know.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow, that's exciting. So another exciting development in your company is you recently acquired rights to sell a product called X-Frame. Is that correct? I saw it on
Yeah,
one of your LinkedIn posts.
yeah, that's correct. So when I was living in California, Northern California, 2 years ago, and during our time out there as a family, met a gentleman named Brett Jackson, who's the CEO of a company out of Australia called Innovise. And what Innovise does is they go around to universities and they find technologies and they help the inventors basically bring those technologies to life. And so in that process, they had just acquired a partnership with X-Frame, which was started by Jed Finch in New Zealand from Victoria University. So Jed is a PhD student at Victoria University in architecture. And so in that process, Brett asked me if I would connect with Jed and kind of tell him, like, I don't know if it's mentor, but kind of give him ideas and kind of encourage him in the process of what he was walking in. And so we really connected, and in that process, they eventually came to me and said, we really would love for you to launch our product in North America. And at first I said, no, I don't think I'm the guy. And so they kept asking me, and I prayed about it, and I said, okay. And then we kind of went through that process. And so, yeah, we launched literally June 13th at NeoCon in Chicago.
Very exciting. So what does X-Frame do, and how does it work with your system?
Yeah, so X-Frame is very similar in concept. When you think of volumetric, parametric wall systems and the speed to build. But it's very different in its materials and the way we go about it. So the X-Frame system is what I would most similarly say is kind of like the future of stick built. So it's literally a CNC system that allows you to build structure. And then over time, you can reconfigure that structure, you can take it apart. And so those parts and pieces, most anybody can build with. So it literally is built with a rubber mallet. So it's all pressure fitted, digital, and it allows, for quick builds. So it actually started out as an accessory dwelling unit building product and has built a number of ADUs in Australia and New Zealand. And then we kind of saw this opportunity in the initial launch in the USA or North America was basically to really start looking at it also as an interior build out platform, to be able to build offices, conference rooms, phone booths, wall dividers. And so those are some of the initial bespoke products.
So do you see it working as like integrating the X-Frame into the Lada Cube, or do you see them working like side by side?
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing is they're probably more side by side.
Yeah.
So they'll be able to come into similar spaces and places. They'll be able to, like, Lada Cube will kind of have its role in more of the type 1 and 2 building requirements, whereas X-Frame can come in and do more independent product pieces that maybe would be classified as furniture or tangible property. Even though I know X-Frame is structural, I think it's when you run into the type 1 and 2 building requirements, I think you're kind of not stuck, but it kind of diverts the product in different directions. But if you're looking at the other building types, you could also use X-Frame to do a lot of structure as well.
And there's plenty of a need for products like X-Frame and Lada Cube. So I don't think they're actually like competition. No, not at all. I think there's plenty of demand and a need for both systems.
Yeah, well, in the X-Frame too, it's all wood. It's very circular. So I mean, obviously with Lada Cube system, we're always looking at, how much of recycled iron ore and other materials iron ore with recycled metal are being used in our product, right? So we're now at roughly 30% recycled metal with iron ore, and we'd love to increase that. And we're looking at some models to do that and talking with some companies of how we can really take that carbon footprint out completely and use fully recycled material. Whereas X-Frame it's a wood product and, fully circular right from the start.
That's very exciting. So how do you see Lada Cube growing in the next 5 years or so? What markets would you like to break into?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would love to continue on the commercial build out space for sure. We see tremendous growth opportunity in that area. I'd love to get to a point where, we're hitting a lot of different markets and different people that could really benefit from the product. We also have aspirations to eventually get into residential and, have a product used for building houses. And part of that for me is just, wanting to remove some of the cost from the model of the residential model, whether that's apartments, right, or single family housing. Because as you know, the costs have just gotten so out of control, and it's really left a ton of people out of the market. So I think about my own kids, like, for them to be able to afford a house and not for it to be such a heavy burden for them. I feel like it's my responsibility to figure out how our products can get to the point where we can, kind of like electronics, right, and other industries, bring the cost down and make them more consistent over time. So as you know, housing is construction in general is one of the top 5 industries in the world from an economic standpoint. But it's out of the top 5, it's the only one that's never had a technological revolution. Absolutely. And the costs continue to just skyrocket.
That's amazing. Like I said at the start of this, I was fascinated when I saw the video of your product coming together. I hadn't even heard of Lada Cube. You've been operating in stealth mode for a couple of years, it seems. So people want to learn more. What's the best way to reach out to y'all?
Yeah, so we have our website, ladacube.com. So it's LADACUBE. So there's some information there. Our Instagram is really full of a lot of cutting edge information and photos. And then, LinkedIn is another way, but our email is info@ladacube.com. And so we'd love to talk with anybody. We're really good at taking projects and saying, is this the best solution? Or should we refer a customer to another client, to another manufacturer? I'm really a big proponent of, we don't have all the solutions. We have quite a few, but there's so many really awesome things happening in the construction industry.
Well, thank you so much, John, for coming on the podcast and telling us everything about Lada Cube and X-Frame. Hope to visit your factory someday and see all this in person.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. We welcome anybody to come by. We do tours. I'm so pleased to get to, sit here with you. And just thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on our show, John. Really appreciate it.